These audio adventures are supported by writers, narrators, and listeners like you. Without your help, these stories can't be produced. If these stories feed your imagination, please consider helping me, Joshua David Ling, feed my family by visiting joshuadavidling.com/support and becoming a monthly contributor. Or you can tip me on Cash App, $ Joshua David Ling. If you'd like to have your audiobook or audio play featured here on Audio Adventures, get in contact with me at joshuadavidling.com. Today's episode is sponsored by the following.
Christians who are artists, artisans, and creators are a unique unit in the war on culture. They're often over and underestimated at the same time. What does it take to be an artist, and what does it take to win the culture war? Join Joshua David Ling as he rallies the troops to answer these questions and promote the best artists for God's glory. We're in this war together. Join us at the front at joshuadavidling.com/poets-at-war.
He has virtually every blood heritage known to man. He's a trained mixed martial artist and diplomat. He is the one man who is chosen to scout and remediate the most dire situations all over the world. He is Braden Silversmith, the worldwide warrior. 1. Heritage of the Warrior. Once in Jamaica, many moons ago, a boy named Simeon was born to his parents, the Silversmiths, Tallulah and Joe. And when Simeon became a man, he worked hard and pushed his might, and one day made it into college to learn and to become bright. Simeon took to history at his university, and soon he majored in a unique field, archaeology. His mind would fill with fantastic tales, folklore, legend, and myth, and he was determined to learn more about the things that made man tick. When Simeon graduated, he went to see the ruins in the Arizona reservation known as Fort Apache. When he arrived in Arizona, he met the family that he'd be staying with for quite a while, and they took him into their flat. The family was very kind to him, though he'd come so very far, and the patriarch of this Apache family was a man named Itza Chu Star. Itza Chu had a wife and 2 children. One was already a man. Itza Chu prized his family like gold, like diamonds he valued his clan. His wife was named Salali, and she was Cherokee. Her son was strong and very brave, and his name was Nahari. Then Itza Chu's daughter, who was only 13, Rayan was her given name, and she had skin like a coffee bean. For 2 months, Simeon stayed in their home, and Rayan cared for him well. She listened to all of Simeon's stories and asked for more to tell. But shortly after his 2nd month, the stars got dreadful news. Nahari was drafted into the army. To Vietnam stepped his boots. Another 2 months went by with Simeon winding down his stint of research on reservation. He would soon leave this town. But then the stars received a letter that caused them all to cry. For in the war with Vietnam, Nahari was shot and died. Simeon stayed for a few days to help console his friends. Then one day Itza Chu Star took Simeon out to the reservation's end. "My daughter is my lone heir now, and I am increasing in age. She is very fond of you, Simeon, and it would not be a disgrace if you were simply to marry her. I would give you a place to stay. Please consider this an option, my son. Please consider and pray." It only took a single night for Simeon to decide. He married Rayan the next day. Itza Chu was full of pride. Then this story brings us to 10 months after that, when Rayan gave birth to their son Django, and this is Django's life track. Django grew up as a normal boy, as reservation kids go. but he took a special liking to computers in the early days when they were slow. He grew up and went to college for computer science and more. He studied in England at Oxford, and his grades earned him encores. Then one day he met a girl, Ariel Meadowlark by name. She was excellent in history and literature, totally not his game. They tutored each other and soon became more than simply just friends. They met and married within 4 months. They were a perfect blend. They soon found out with DNA testing their blood held nearly every race, Celtic, Germanic, and Asian with Ariel, and a whole lot more within that space. Django held many a darker race like African, Indian, and more, like Arab and Hispanic and Polynesian. Listing them all was a chore. Then within their first 2 years they had a baby boy, Braden Silversmith, who was to them their pride and joy. When Braden was only 3 years old, Django and Ariel were asked to go on a missions trip with their church, and so they took Braden back to his parents in Fort Apache to watch him while they went. But little did 3-year-old Braden know, his time with his parents was spent. Over the Bermuda Triangle, his parents' plane disappeared. Braden was left to be raised by his grandparents, so in wisdom he was reared. Simeon taught Braden to love folklore. He told him many tales of knights and Vikings and samurai, of monsters and dragon scales. But once again, when Braden was 11, a plane met with disaster as it crashed into the World Trade Center and made him grow up faster. But while all the world was crashing down around the USA, Braden and his grandmother were in Fort Apache watching Simeon decay. Cancer was taking him faster than they knew, and before they had reached the 12th, Simeon died in a hospital bed with no way left to help. Rayan comforted Braden a while, but then they had to move on. She got a job teaching in LA, so to California they were drawn. She raised Braden alone for 9 years, maintaining love in their hearts. She raised Braden to be a warrior. And this is where our story truly starts. 2. Fight. The graphics rolled across the screen and guitars wailed their tunes. The opening fight of CFC 120 was beginning soon. The announcers greeted the watching fans and ran down that night's card and turned their attention to the opening fight. Tonight's referee is John Bernard. Acoustic guitar filled the arena and many stood up and cheered the former light heavyweight champion whom many a fighter feared. His entrance song spoke of Old West tropes, being wanted dead or alive. Overall, Timothy Kidd was one who was either loved or despised. After Kidd proceeded into the cage, a more aggressive song came on. An aggressive headbanging metal tune with gruff vocals all along. The lyrics spoke of a warrior inside, and the crowd cheered loudly to know this unknown rookie, Braden Silversmith, was from the Greater 310. His long hair and goatee are unorthodox, Jim. Normally a fighter gets a shave. Being in there with Tim Kidd wearing hair like that is either stupid or brave. The cage was locked and the fight began. The two fighters circled around. The striker Tim Kidd looking to throw punches, and Braden was looking for a takedown. Those were the strategies everyone expected, but shortly something very strange occurred. Tim Kidd shot into Braden's legs. How incredibly absurd! The striker switching up his game to throw his opponent out of sync. This is why Tim Kidd is a former champion. He works hard to make you think. As soon as Tim Kidd took Braden down, however, Tim relinquished the attack. Braden slowly got up to his feet from lying down on his back. The two circled again, and Tim threw those trademark right hooks of his. Braden took two like a champion and grabbed Tim's leg like a wrestling whiz. Takedown by Silversmith. Kidd tries to roll away, but Braden Silversmith isn't letting go today. Braden grabbed Tim's far arm in between his legs and trapped the near arm, and Tim began to beg. Braden cranked on Tim's head.
but he couldn't hold Kid down. Tim slipped out, and Braden frowned. Tim mounted Braden like a champ. Tim's punches came rapid and hard. Braden blocked with his hands and tried to put Tim in his guard. Kid raining down on the rookie with everything he's got. Then Braden turned over to his stomach, something most teachers tell you should not. Did Braden just give Tim his back? Tim Kid didn't waste any time. He jumped at the chance to grab a rear naked choke, but in an instant, he changed his mind. Suddenly, the referee called for the bell. What on earth just went down? The crowd was silent for a minute to hear what winner was to be crowned. Let's run the take back, Jim. I think I might have seen what happened in that one split second. Let's see if there's something to glean. The replay ran again, and they saw the critical moment therein. When Kid rolled back with Braden's neck on his arm, Braden's elbow was on Kid's shin. Braden had both of his hands firmly gripped around Tim Kid's right foot. Braden pulled up with his hands, his elbow went down, and Tim Kid was kaput. Tim Kid tapped so lightning fast, only the referee saw. Braden was declared the winner, and the people cheered in awe. The Warrior of California takes his first win. Was a legend born tonight? 3. Interview. After the fight with Tim Kid and the party in the locker room, Braden left with his best friend Jonathan into the night's air and gloom. The Los Angeles smog shifted and writhed with mystery in the dark, brooding sky, but thankfully the well-lit parking lot dispelled the terror, the danger, and lies. As Braden and Jonathan passed through the doors of the venue where Braden had fought, a reporter with an old microcassette headed them off by the parking lot. He mashed record and proceeded to ask a few questions for those who still read the Los Angeles Herald, though many said print media was certainly dead. Braden Silversmith, I'm Chris Magnus. To the LA Herald I report. I was sent to cover the fights tonight for the pages of sport. What were your thoughts on fighting tonight on TV for the first time? Braden took the interruption in stride. Dude, it blew my mind. The reporter asked a couple more questions, then shut his recorder down. Are you guys headed back? Do you live far from town? Nah, not very far at all. We're just waiting for my grandmother. Do you remember me from years ago? Your grandma was the other reason I came out tonight. Just then, from out the door, came Braden Silversmith smiling broadly with a big hug in store. Chris Magnus, how have you been? She embraced Chris warmly there. You look so much better since you cut your hair. Don't worry about me, Grandma. It's not like I won tonight. I'll get to you, Braden Nahuel. Do you remember Chris? He was one of your students, right? He came over to the house a lot. Well, I kinda came to talk in private. We know when to get lost. Braden and Jonathan snickered at their sarcasm, and Rayan shooed them away. They got in the car together and relaxed for the first time that day. 4. Sleep on it. Dude, that fight was absolutely insane. He hit harder than I've ever seen, and he even threw you off your game. But you stuck to it, and you stuck it to him. I know, man. I loved it. But don't think I haven't taken hits. But man, you rose above it. Dude, I'm telling you. In a few years, you'll be fighting there too. Just stick to your training. You've got the heart. Don't stop it. Pursue. I don't know, man. I don't do things like you. The little dragons are hard enough for me. Maybe I should get a clue. Dude, don't talk like that at all. You've got so much to offer. I wonder what they're talking about. Who? Chris and your grandmother. Are you sure the man was serious? This all sounds very far-fetched. I have a recording of it on tape. This was not a jest. I sent you a letter with more information. I'm afraid of emailing right now. They have ways of intercepting those, though I'm not exactly sure how. Chris, I'm praying for you. Be careful, but work hard. This sounds very dangerous. Please be safe and on guard. I will be, Rayan. Pray for me. I have a lot more to do. I'll mail you more when I get it. Well, you better go, shoo. Chris laughed and walked into the night, contemplating his plans, and Rayan walked back to the car to drive home with her winning man. 5. To market, to market. The following morning, Rayan rose early and set out to buy food for her home. The farmer's market just downtown had the best food no matter where she roamed. She knew that Braden would be tired and sore after that MMA bout, and she planned to fix his favorite breakfast when he was up and about. She could have driven her car downtown, but with LA traffic it'd be much easier to go on foot, and besides, she'd feel more free. And free she felt as she paced the aisles with attention and with care, and she called to all the people she knew who shopped and worked down there. But as she walked by a freezer case, her freedom feelings plucked a note that soured in her imagination and made a lump in her throat. She saw her reflection in the freezer case and wondered who it could be. This grandmother of a 20-year-old? Could she really be free? Her jet black hair was beginning to thin, though she was only 55. She looked closer and saw some were going gray, and bitter feelings welled up inside. She thought of her lost husband and son, and how Braden was all she had left. She fingered a black pen in her pocket, the one that was close to her breast. She finished her shopping as her mind weighed and contemplated her mortality, then shuffled off with her bags in her hands, questioning what the future would be. As Rayan began her journey home, she realized that she had let her guard down from looking around, and for this she felt very bad. "You must keep an eye out downtown," Rayan thought to herself. "No telling what people might hassle you." Just then, a tingling she felt. She looked around and saw a man she'd seen in her periphery. She realized that he'd been watching her ever since she began feeling free. He had followed her all around, trying to stay just out of sight. She began to walk faster and ducked down an alley she did not want to have to fight. The man was dark with a mustache, and he was otherwise nondescript. He looked like something of Indian descent, but Rayan could only look quick. She hustled away to throw him off, but then she bumped into another man, who stood almost 6.5 feet, and he whistled at her then. "Hey, mama, where you going? Why don't you come with me?" Rayan wasted no time at all and pulled her black pen free. She stabbed him with the pointed end and then shouted 3 simple words. "Stun gun, mutatio!" And him into pain she did send. The pen turned into a stun gun in a moment, and then the man hit the ground. Rayan picked up her bags quickly and ran till she was safe and sound. Once back in her neighborhood, she stared at the weapon in her hand. "Pen, mutatio," she said once again. "It's time to take a stand." The stun gun turned back into a pen, and Rayan went back to her dwelling, compiling a story in her mind that anyone would find compelling. 6. Shadow Lash. The following morning, breakfast smells wafted all through the Silversmith house. Braden's bruised and broken body stirred, and he twitched his nose like a mouse. Ham and egg, potatoes and cheese. Yes, he was ready for this. He pulled his long hair out of his face. He stood up and nearly missed. His legs wobbled under him as he went downstairs, his body craving carbs and protein. He sat down at the table and thought to himself, "I'm so hungry I might just scream." Luckily for Braden, he didn't have to. Rayan brought a dish right in. It had wonderful thick pieces of bacon on it and cheese and eggs within. Breakfast casserole. Braden beamed with contentment. "I am so ready for food." "Wait, not yet." Rayan set the dish down. "Don't be so hasty and rude." Braden frowned for just a moment, but Rayan produced a black blade. He didn't see where she got it from, but his stomach rumblings were grave. "Is that a tomahawk?" he asked with a smile. "You know it's not my birthday yet." "I know, Braden. I'm giving it to you now because if I don't, it'll get lost in a minute. Every year it's the same story. You go out with all your friends. Well, thanks for the tomahawk, Grandma. Then he asked for breakfast again. Would you wait for just a few seconds? This isn't an ordinary hatchet. It's been passed down through our family and has a story attached to it. Braden relented and sat back to listen, but his mind within him said, by the time she finishes this family story, Jonathan will be awake and I'll be dead. A long time ago in Georgia, before it was called a state, our Cherokee ancestor ruled Standing Peachtree, and he was a chief that was great. Degataga was his name. He led his people well, and he especially kept his countrymen safe from black magic powers and spells. Once there was a sinful witch, Harbingela by name, who happened across Degataga's braves, who arrested her for her shame. They brought her before the chief, and she begged him for her life. And even though she bribed the chief, her heart still clung to spite. Chief Degataga, she quaintly cooed, please forgive me of my magic's rude, but I am a poor, wretched soul. But I have a gift that is worthy of your role. If you will accept this, promise will I to leave this forest forever and never again on you spy. The chief thought through for a minute or two all the witch had to say. It's true her power had waned a lot, and mercy was his heart's way. He agreed to the gift, and she thanked him well, with a new tomahawk and a magic spell. But nearly a week later, Harbingela was found again, and nothing could stop Degataga's braves or the many men who came from all over the world to end the witch queen Harbingela and all their furies spend. Harbingela was sealed away, but the tomahawk remains. It has been passed down from firstborn to firstborn, and here it passes again. It was passed from my mother Salali to your uncle Nahari. He died in Vietnam, and so it passed to me. I passed it to your father, but Django's lost or gone. Now it passes to you, Braden, my eldest and only grandson. Rayan saw the quizzical look forming in Braden's eyes. She took the blade from off the table and smiled in a way that was wry. She grabbed a fork from off the table and crossed the tomahawk's shaft with the handle of the fork, and she spoke 2 words of craft. Fork, mutatio, was all she need say, and the tomahawk turned into a fork right away. It was black like before, but with a little blue stripe. It was black like before, but with a little blue stripe. Not just like the silver fork, but black as darkest night. Rayan pulled the forks apart and said 1 word again. Mutatio, she said in a clear voice, and the fork form met its end. The black tomahawk with pale blue stripe, Braden suddenly saw in another light. Rayan held it out, and Braden took it in hand. This is unbelievable. Treasure it. Yes, ma'am. I never dream of pawning this for cash. The name of the tomahawk is Shadowlash, and wherever you would want to have a fork again, hold it in your hand and speak these words, Braden. Fork, then mutatio. It needn't be crossed. The tomahawk stores that information for whenever you're lost. You can copy any inanimate object that you can hold in your hands. You can call it back at any time. Thank you so much, ma'am. So I cross it with whatever I want to copy and name it and tell it to change? That's what mutatio means, right? You've got it. Wow, this is strange. He put the tomahawk on the table, and the 2 of them embraced. Then Rayan began to serve Braden with a smile and with grace. Meanwhile, a sleepy-headed Jonathan zombie walked down the stairs, his head a tangle of interwoven locks. Dude, nice hair. 7. A shock. The day went on as usual, until that very same night. Braden and Jonathan wore out the DVD copy of his fight. But later on in the evening, Rayan watched the news, while Jonathan and Braden sat upstairs watching some film and reviews. Rayan absent-mindedly played with her phone, as she halfway listened there. Then came the moment she never expected, what the news anchor had to share. The anchor stared into the camera, and sadness hit his face. He borrowed the tone he'd used many times before when describing this sort of case. Tonight, a journalist was murdered in downtown Sacramento. The police have very scarce leads. No murder weapon or memento. Chris Magnus was found in his apartment. Rayan tilted her head. Her jaw dropped and she couldn't believe her former student was dead. She quickly got up from her seat and ran over to rummage through all the mail she'd received that day. She remembered the letter was blue. She found it in an instant and tore it open to read a handwritten message from Chris Magnus. Her shock and worry it did feed. 8. Where is the tape? Rayan wasted no time and used her phone to capture the letter. She took a picture of it with her camera. It would last there much better. But once she did, the signal bar on her phone suddenly went dead. Then she heard a sound at the door that filled her heart with dread. The distinct sound of a gun silencer, followed by a metallic thunk. Told her without having to look it wasn't just some LA drunk. 3 men burst into the room and told her to get down on the floor. Rayan sunk down to her knees, but they had a lot more in store. One of them came into her view, his dark face covered with a mask. "Where is the tape, woman?" "I thought you'd never ask." She sat there smiling for a moment, as the man waited, confused. The man then backhanded her across the face. "You don't have to be rude." The man then stuck a knife below her chin and stared into her eyes. "Tell us where the tape is now. Tell us, or you die." 9. Meeting the invaders. In an instant quicker than most, a number of things occurred. The man who held the knife to Rayan, his vision was instantly blurred. Pain shot into his shoulder, and he stumbled back amazed. An arrow stuck out of his upper right arm, and that arrow didn't just graze. Along with this violent second, a second thing began to develop. The lights flickered off and on, things just beginning to start up. Rayan used this precious sliver of time to turn the tide. She grabbed a lamp off a nearby table, and she did not run and hide. She threw the lamp at her attackers, literally shocking the two. A few words in another language echoed as the violence grew. The attackers retreated into the night as Rayan screamed and gave chase. "You better run, you scum!" They ran and left no trace. Rayan looked as the lights normalized, and she saw on the balcony upstairs Jonathan and Braden, her saviors, standing there. "I told Jonathan to grab the lights," he said as his adrenaline waned. His bow stood at ease by his side. "I know that it was harebrained." "Who the heck were those guys?" Rayan looked down in dread. "They were looking for something that Chris gave me." "Braden, Chris is dead." 10. Dead Man's Letter. "What?" Braden asked in amazement. "Did those guys do it to him?" "I don't know yet, Braden, but they will pay for their sin." Rayan took a few moments, looking for the mail that Chris had sent to her. She was determined to not fail. When she couldn't find it, she remembered her cell phone's pic, the one she took in case of emergency, and she navigated to it. And when she had the picture pulled up, she zoomed in on the text. She cleared her throat and began to read. That reading is what comes next. "My dearest Rayan, my favorite teacher, I hope this finds you well. Well, better than my circumstances. Lately it feels like hell. I was just attacked in a bar, but I got away with a tape. I'm going to put it in a safe place. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but I need you to retrieve it. Should anything happen to me, it is connected to what we talked about. You know what it could be. P.O. Box 292 at Killingsworth Road, Post Office. I place the tape in your trust. Your faithful friend in Christ, Chris Alexander Magnus. To be continued. Thanks for listening to this episode of Audio Adventures. If your imagination was fed by this story, I pray that you'll consider supporting these stories at joshuadavidling.com/support or on Cash App, $Joshua David Ling. Until next time, keep adventuring.